It's not about what you have. It's about who you have. It's not about where you live. It's about how you live. And it's not about what you do. It's about why you do it. Welcome to the Momenticize podcast. Today, I have got a very special guest for us. We're going to get to walk through the mind of a true entrepreneur, somebody who took an idea, well, it was at a campfire, into a multi-million-dollar business. Without further ado, please help me welcome Tyrone Hazen to the podcast.
I appreciate it, man. Thank you so much for having me. Excited to be here and chat with you today.
Boom. Thank you for coming on. I've actually been really looking forward to this one. We've been trying to work it out with our schedule, so I'm super excited to have you on. For anyone who doesn't know you, just give us a quick backstory and we'll go from there.
Sure. Yeah. Tyrone Hazen. I'm the founder of a company called Puffin Drinkwear based here in Bend, Oregon. And we make insulated clothing for your drink to wear. So yeah, just a fun little thing that's taken me on a wild journey that I'm excited to share, and hopefully people can benefit a little bit from, kind of the experiences that I've had.
Yeah. I mean, they're not just that, they're also dang stylish. You can see them here. We're rocking them. My favorite one, this is the one I'm taking home, the American flag one. Cause you guys know I'm proud to be an American. So I love them. Can you tell us a little bit about, obviously you have an entrepreneurial spirit, but take us back to when Puffin was born. What was that like? And talk us through that journey.
Yeah, it's kind of, well, I find it interesting. Maybe you won't, but I had tried a couple of product-based businesses in the past, and each one kind of gave me another stepping stone forward, but none of them ever really took off. And so one night I'm hanging out with some buddies just down the street here, actually, in the backyard, and we're having some beers, and the host comes out and he's tossing out some koozies to everybody. And the one that he happened to toss to me it was interesting. It was like this wraparound thing. It just had a Velcro strip and it wrapped around your drink. And so I put it on and it felt different than I'm used to. And it felt like the remnants of an old sleeping bag. And so I was like, oh man, that's interesting. And luckily I had a bottle, not a can in. And as I look at it, I was like, oh, that bottle's kind of proportioned like a person. What if I made a sleeping bag for my beer bottle, right? We're in Bend, Oregon. And so we do beer and we do the outdoors, it's very well known. And so I got to think, that's kind of a fun idea. Maybe I'll go do something with that. And because of the previous, what I'll call failures in my previous product startups, I had enough connections and I had enough know-how to know where to go or what to do. So I reached out to some contacts of mine overseas and was like, hey, I've got this idea. Can you do this? I know you don't normally do soft goods, but could you help with this? And they were like, yeah, I think I get the idea. Send me a tech pack. I was like, man, I don't know.
What's a tech pack?
Exactly. I don't know. I didn't know what a tech pack was. Yeah. What they're asking for is, a multi-page document that shows all of your dimensions and all of the materials you're going to use.
Design.
And all the design, and it's laid out, and it's how your cut patterns and all these different things. And I didn't know. So I sent them a 1-page sheet of paper that had a picture of a beer bottle next to a picture of a mummy bag. And was like, figure this out. Right. And so, and it worked. They were like, okay, we got it. And so people will go to bat for you, and they'll put the effort into help you get that next step along. So what I did then, I didn't think, there were a couple of things here I didn't think would go the way that they have gone. And one is I didn't think that people would pay what we need to charge for these. Once I got costing on them, I was like, oh man, is somebody really going to pay close to $20 for a koozie? I didn't think they would. So I thought, okay, we need to go add specialty. We need to go sell these to businesses at a traditional wholesale price and let them just give them away as a promotional item. So that was one thing that has gone a very different direction, because we're very much a retail brand at this point.
So you sent from a tech pack, you sent them, instead of all the technical cuts, all you sent them was a beer bottle and a picture of a little sleeping bag.
Exactly. Yeah. And so luckily we're here in Bend. And so we have enough contacts to where we can reach. I mean, there's enough beer industry here that we were able to reach out and get some feedback on it. People are like, hey, we're going away from bottles. Everybody's going towards cans. So immediately we're like, all right, well, we got to figure something out for cans then. And so that's where we came up with the jacket. I was like, oh man, we're an outdoor. We thought of ourselves as an outdoor company, and we were going to go into all sorts of other non-koozie related things. We were going to go do soft-sided lunch bags and coffee kits.
All dressed up like this.
Not necessarily. We didn't quite know, right? It was we had the initial one, which I didn't bring, but the initial one just kind of had these batting, layers of batting, right? And so we were we could use that same style on a tote bag. You could use the same thing, and we could build a coffee kit that people are taking with them. And maybe it would always have that signature, kind of puffy jacket style thing. Because that was our first thing, was the puffy jacket. And we ended up meeting with a design consultant at one point, our branding consultant at one point, he was like, you guys are crazy. Like, you guys have such a thing here. You need to absolutely, we called it Koozie Land as like a negative. We didn't want to stay in Koozie Land. And he was like, you guys are like, you're in blue water and you're swimming towards all this red water where there's all sorts of competition, but you've found this huge space. You've reinvented the koozie. You've got to like plant a flag everywhere you can here. So if you can go this direction, plant it because somebody else will. You've opened the door. Go get all the real estate you can. And so we did. We're like, all right, double down on Koozie Land. And so then we came up with this concept of drinkware, W-E-A-R.
Yeah.
So we're insulated apparel for your drink to wear.
Yeah, I mean, it's super creative. It's a super great idea. I think one of the things, like a lot of people, they might be listening, like, okay, cool. The idea comes when you're drinking some beers with a friend, but then what does it actually take from idea to now vetting that idea and then bringing it into an actual business?
Sure.
Great, you have an idea, that's one thing, but to then vet it and push it into a business, that's a major journey that takes a ton of different things. Before we go into that, you said you had a couple other ventures essentially that were failures or stepping stones towards it. What were those? Like, let's talk about those a little bit.
Yeah, sure. So the very first thing I came up with was called, we first called it Swix. And then it turns out there's a company out there called Swix, which I knew about, but it was such a different, it's a ski wax thing. And mine was a shoelace, like a shoe apparel component, a shoe accessory. So we had to rename it. We called it Tongue Traps. And I had this pair of shoes that I loved. They were a pair of Nikes and the tongue would slide down and it didn't look cool, right? I was like, that's why I bought these shoes. So I was like, there's gotta be a way to hold my tongue in place. And your tongue usually has that little loop on it that you lace your laces through. But that doesn't stop it from sliding sideways. That stops it from like sliding up and down. So I came up with this little elastic strap that had a nub on it that was looped the other way. So now you could lace your laces through it and it would kind of like anchor that in place. And then that anchors the tongue in place. It holds it. So learned a ton on that one because it was like if you go to a shoe store and you're like, hey, I've got this $5 solution that people that might come in and might see this would be interested in. They're like, I'd rather sell them a $130 pair of shoes to fix their problem, right? So, and then you just learn so much about that process. How do you talk to an overseas factory? How do you get in touch with them? What is that like? What do they need from you? What does costing look like? Like, is it really as cheap to do what you think you're going to do over there? What do margins need to look like? You learn all about kind of the business landscape. You learn about like the financial landscape. You learn about your own financial documents and like needing that education. So that was the first one. It's called Tongue Traps. And so me and a buddy started that. One of my college buddies started that, and we ran it. And then you learned kind of how to get tough skin, and you go door to door and you're like, hey, I've got this dumbass thing. are you interested? And you try to, you do your best to sell.
So you were door knocking. You were door knocking businesses, knocking. Yeah.
Yeah. I was going to like shoe businesses, you know, like not the big chains, but like find your mom,
like Fleetwood,
mom and pop.
Exactly.
Find a mom and pop shop and be like, hey, I'm an entrepreneur. I've got this little idea, and here's we've created the packaging and packaging. That's a whole thing. Yeah,
I mean the whole pack. So you were just going like a true entrepreneur, idea, door knocking, like to businesses, saying, hey, I got this solution, let's sell it. And you learned essentially feedback you got. You got a bunch of good lessons, fundamental lessons, but the feedback you were getting was like, I want to sell a $130 shoe, not a $5 solution, right?
Yeah, like this isn't really viable as an add-on. If you're a big company that's already making a bunch of stuff for shoes, maybe this makes sense to add to your slew of products you're offering. Yeah. But as a one product company, that's really hard to be a one product company. We can get into that too, like in the retail space. They don't want to just like put all the effort in to have one product of yours on your shelf.
When did you know to close the door on that idea?
Man, it kind of closed on its own. I think it never got to the point where I was full, I had a full-time job on the side. So this was a side project. And eventually it just kind of was like, man, there's been enough coming our way. I think this is probably common of a lot of entrepreneurs. I've got no shortage of ideas. Yep. And so when something else was shinier than the thing that I was working on, I was like, man, that really doesn't have legs, which brought me to my next project. Yep. And this one was cool. It's called the Fireside Audio Box. Totally different. It's a Bluetooth audio player that syncs Dancing Flames to the music that you're listening to. Yep. So it's this, I think it's beautiful. It was my first attempt at like design. Yeah. And so it's this, like 13 by 9-inch box with glass panels on the top and a metal tube, and it's plumbed with propane gas, and it's got a Bluetooth player, or it's got a Bluetooth chip in it. And so you literally light like 15 little flames. They're like candle size flames. and you hook up your music, and as it's playing music, the flames are responding in time to the music you're listening to. So it was really cool. I have a background in physics from university. And so that's like a very simple physics demonstration that they use. And I was like, I wonder if I can take that from, usually it's like a 10-foot thing. Can I make that coffee table size? That was the thing. And so I love that piece, the product design, mostly the like scientific experiment there was the fun thing.
Was your
like,
tech book more, this had to be a little more technical this time?
This one, I just designed a full prototype myself and took it with me to China.
Meaning you designed it, you did the whole thing, you made it work. And then you said, so, I mean, see, that's what's cool about this. Like, it's so fun for me to talk to like a real, I think there's a couple different types of entrepreneurs. You have like the innovative entrepreneur, which you are. You're the innovative entrepreneur. You think about the ideas. I'm what you would call like kind of a boring entrepreneur, meaning like,
is that the technical?
Yeah, that's what I'm calling it. Like, you know, we meet one of the human needs, which is we build housing and we build apartments, right? So we meet one of the human needs. We can get a little bit innovative, but it's really a process where we still have to build a business. It's entrepreneur, et cetera, but it's not this really cool, innovative idea. I'm not making a product like that. It's pretty dang cool to dive into. So you actually prototyped it, made it, and then you flew with that prototype over to China.
Yeah.
What was that like?
That was a wild experience for a couple of different reasons. So luckily, again, here in Bend, we have this incredible ecosystem around startups, especially physical product-based startups. And we have companies that have, had $multi-100 million exits and stuff. And we're a small enough town where like, I can reach out to those people and be like, hey, can I grab coffee with you? Can I take you out for a beer? I've got this idea and I need to know some, I need some answers, or I need some connections or something. So that was really, really helpful for me in the journey that I've been on, both with Fireside and with Puffin.
It's all a relationship game, isn't it?
Relationships are so helpful. And it's not necessarily like because they're going to do some favor for you. It's just they know something and they can pass that along, or they're like, oh, here's how you do that. Like, it's not secret knowledge. You just don't know it. Yeah. So I'm happy to share it with you.
Exactly.
So, so because of some of those connections in town, I had shared with a buddy of mine that I was going to I literally already booked my flight. I went on Alibaba and I found other things that were made of the same type of components. Yeah. So I found things, audio players that were made out of bamboo, because I knew that's what I wanted. And they're all made in Shenzhen. So I was like, all right, cool. I'll just book a flight to Shenzhen. And I told a friend of mine that who's a product engineer or industrial designer. And he's like, oh man, dude, like we gotta, let's go grab a beer. Like, when are you available? That's not how it works. It's a communist country. You have to be invited to come there. You have to have a sponsor.
Yeah, you're going.
Like, you can't. I was just going to show up.
Yeah. You're going to start door knocking. You're going to
door knock. Yeah. It's one of those, you just got to push until you find like a way. That's one of the things that I bring up in a lot of times when I'm talking to new entrepreneurs is this idea of, how do I do this? And I try and get people to rephrase that question into how can I do this? Because when you say, how do I do this? You're looking for a solution. You're looking for the way. And there isn't usually the way. If you're an entrepreneur, you're hacking your way through the jungle on a path that doesn't exist yet. So by asking, how can I do this? Now you open yourself up to well, that might not be the most efficient way, but it's a way. Let me I can try that way, or I can try it this way, I can try it that way. And so you just pound your head against all of the walls until one of them gives, and then you make a little progress. And then generally you run into another wall. Yeah.
With positive pivots, right? You start, like you said, it's crazy when you reframe a question like that. It's really cool you said that, because I specifically remember thinking to myself, there's not a right or wrong way to do this. We just need to move forward and then just create positive pivots along the way. And as long as we keep the growth mindset and we keep trying to pivot and get a little bit better, we'll find, like you said, we'll find the right path. Yeah. So it's just reframing that a little bit. There's not the way. There's let's just try to make something happen and we'll find the way.
Find a way.
Yeah.
And your way will be your own, right? Yeah. You look back and you might be able to borrow some tools or some skill sets that other people have gone that way before you. But your path is on your own, because if you were doing their path and there's nothing new, you're not offering any value there. You're not creating anything.
Yeah. So you're going to China. Your friend says, hey,
so my friend's like, hey man,
get a beer.
Let's grab a beer. Let's talk about this. So he kind of walks me through and he's like, let me put you in touch with somebody. I've got a contact over there. And it's an American guy, but he owns a factory in China, and he can be supportive of you. And so he put us in touch, and it was super helpful. It was really great. And so we lined it. I kind of showed him what I was working on. I was like, yeah, sounds cool. Bring the prototype and we'll get you set up and we'll see what we can piece together. So I had my flight already booked. So I was like, all right, you got to, come meet me at this place. So getting on the plane, I didn't want to put it in my luggage because one, I didn't want it to get lost, because that was the only reason I was going over there. You moved out for a couple of days and I've got nothing. It was a total wasted trip all the way halfway around the world. So I wanted to carry it on. it looks like a pipe bomb, dude. This is it's a thing I put together in my garage that I literally, like, if they test it for gas, they're going to find propane gas on it, which I don't know if they test for or not, but it's got wires and all sorts of things going everywhere. So it was sketchy as I'm going through the Redmond airport. I'm like, I'm going to have some explaining to do for sure. And I did. And they were like, okay, we get it. Then I get to, I flew, it was wild, man. I flew in, I landed in Beijing. And then when you get there, they meet you when you come off the plane. If you're not from China, they meet you the second you get off the plane, like right there at the jetway. Somebody will have your name on a sign, and they grab a small group of you and they take you into kind of their immigration area. And then they just take your passport and go away. And you're like, man, you have no idea what's going on. I didn't speak a word of the language. So there's a handful of others with you. So you feel like safety in numbers. You're like, all right, I guess this is normal.
You're kind of all looking at each other.
Yeah. Right. And
you got this weird black box with you too.
Right. I've got this thing and so I sit there for, it's like 3 hours. They hold you for a little while in this area. And then eventually they just come out and give you your thing. And they're like, you're free to go. Well, I had a connection to make. So I'm in Beijing. I need to fly to Shenzhen. And when normally when you connect in an airport, you just go connect. You don't have to go back through security. Well, the way they had processed us, we're back in like the what do you call it? Like the non-sterile component of the part of the airport. So we had to go back through security. And now I'm like, well, now how do I explain this? Like, I don't speak a word of Chinese, So, and I was like, and I'm a little like, if they don't stop me, I'm concerned to get on the plane because like they're letting anybody through here. If they're not going to stop this, I don't know what TSA or their version of TSA is doing. So I go through, sure enough, they stop me. And so meanwhile, I'm like trying to pull up my website to show, so I can at least show them what it is. And so they stop me, they try to talk to me. And I was like, just kind of give them the old shoulder shrug, like, smile at them and like kind of point at it. And they look at each other and all right. And they just let me through. So that was, so I'm in. And so I meet with they pick me up at the airport when I finally land in Shenzhen. I'm actually going to an area called Zhuhai, which is near enough to Shenzhen. So they come and meet me, this guy, Bill, great guy. And we meet that night, he grabs a prototype from me, and then I'm off for a week in, where did I go? I went to Thailand for my best friend's wedding. Yeah. So the timing just worked out perfect. So I go to Thailand, he's like, hey, we'll see you in a week. So I go to Thailand, I do that, come back, get sick as a dog. I'm so sick as I'm coming back. And they have these things in the airport where they actually like do a thermal scan of everybody coming off of planes coming into China. And so I'm worried that they're going to see that I'm sick and they're going to like quarantine me for a week or something. And so I'm trying to like, I'm putting water on me, like walking fast through the airport.
Acting cool.
Yeah. And just kind of like made myself look like I was feeling well. So he picks me back up, same guy. We spend a day in Hong Kong and then we work our way over to Zhuhai and then Shenzhen, and we sit down at a long conference table at the factory. So I get to see an actual factory. Yeah. And I'd never seen a factory, and a factory is definitely not, I don't care what you think it is. It's not that. It's very different than what you think it is.
It's opposite of what you think.
Yeah. It's really wild. So I got to see one, and they're making all sorts of different things. They walk us through, and then they sit us down at this big, long coffee table or big conference table. And there's my prototype sitting in the middle. And then I'm taking a closer look at it. I'm like, it's different. That's not my prototype. It had taken me 2 years to build this thing, and they had a better version done in a week.
Wow.
And they were like, so then they walked me through and they showed me all the changes and all the upgrades and the safety devices. I had no safety. Like if you knock this thing over, it was just pumping gas out, So it was a rad experience, and a ton of excitement in like, having a reason to go to, I never thought I'd go to China, and to go to China and for a business purpose and to have a reason. And so it was a really neat part of my journey. And so sure enough, I did a Kickstarter campaign, and
you did it. So they had a prototype for you right there. You did a Kickstarter campaign. What about like talk us through prototype, and then what they want you to buy a certain amount. What is that? What's the financial part of that look like? Yeah.
So that's all a negotiation. And so they were aware that I was startup. And so there are factories of all different levels. And some of them are, they're, if you're not spending $1 million plus, you're not interested.
Not even in the conversation.
And so at that point, we're still like getting costing figured out. It's like, hey, what does it cost you to make that?
So you don't know yet.
No, exactly. And then they're wanting to know from you, well, what's your budget?
Yeah, so they're playing that negotiation.
There's a little bit of that. And some of that is negotiation, and it's them trying to like get what they can out of you. And some of it is like, we can do this at a really high level, or we can
cut a bunch of things. Exactly.
Absolutely.
So
we can bring down materials, like where can you land? And so So yeah, that's just kind of a little bit of like, hey, I'll show you one of my cards, you show me one of yours, and eventually you kind of end up in a place. Everybody's really like, if you've got a good sourcing agent and a good factory, no one's trying to screw anybody.
Yeah, no,
you're trying to find like, what's the happy medium to where we both win from this relationship.
Yeah. So where'd you end up? I mean, you guys are showing each other cards. You're still trying to work it out, and in the meantime, you're running a Kickstarter campaign.
Yeah, correct. Because I knew what I could make it for stateside.
Okay, so
because I was literally just going to make them in my garage,
Yep.
And so I knew what my costs were. I had a general assessment of how much time it would take me to assemble one of these things, and I was like, all right, I can just. So I had a general price in mind.
Yeah,
and
you
I
knew
was like,
stateside what it would cost. You figured
it's going to be less.
Yeah. So that's what you based off. So you're still figuring out here. Boom, you start a Kickstarter campaign. What's a Kickstarter campaign? What is it? Yeah, what is it?
You don't know? Oh, okay.
No, I know.
You know, but I don't explain. Yeah. So Kickstarter is a crowdfunding.
Yep.
So you kind of like pitch this idea of, hey, if you pre-order this and I get enough orders, I can go make this. You help me fund. It gives me the seed capital to go build this product, and then when I get it, I'll be able to deliver one to you. And so you get a great price. You're gonna get it at half the price that I'm going to ultimately sell it for, but that's enough money for me to go. So everybody's, it's one of those like, hey, if we all take a little risk, maybe we all get a little bit of the reward.
Yeah, and you make a cool marketing video. It's on a platform. People can be like, hey, yep, I love this prototype. Yeah. Yes, I think this is a cool idea. I'm going to buy one. And then let's say you try to raise, you need 1,000 people to buy one. Boom.
Right.
That's where you're going off, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And so I made like $38,000 in sales on that one.
What did it feel like to go from? What did that feel like? Were you disappointed? Or you wanted more? It was disappointment.
It was disappointing. It was interesting because this was back in the early days, and so you would hear all of these stories of people going like, "Yeah, we needed to raise 20,000, and they raised 480, or millions of dollars." And this was in those early days of that kind of thing. And so we're like, all right, this is the type of product I think that could do that. It should go viral on the socials, and we get enough input from enough positive support on Kickstarter, this thing might blow up. And so I had a goal of, I think it was 300,000 was my like, I won't go forward if I don't get 300,000 off of this thing. But we set a goal of like 35 grand.
Yep.
And
got 38.
And we got 38. So it was one of those like, man, and I had a lot of people that had helped me at the time. I had a business partner at the time on that project. And I was like, he had done a lot of the work, putting in the videos and doing the film work and building the website and helping build the campaign. And I was like, man, that's a really nice feather for his hat to say I had a successful Kickstarter campaign. But if you cancel it, you don't get to say that. So I was like, all right, we're gonna go for it. And so I didn't cancel the campaign before it closed. So now the money got funded to me. I'm due to give roughly 100 people product.
Yeah.
So then you've got like the fire behind you. So that gives you the motivation of like, hey, I'm going to do, like, these people took a risk on me. I want to do well by them. So I got to figure this out. And so you go to bat, you go figure it out. And so luckily we were able to do that. It took some time, but we got pricing back that worked, that I was able to cover the cost of buying all of my product and getting it shipped over here. And so I've got a picture somewhere on my Instagram of me. I got to deliver it again back to all this stuff it gets shipped, and then finally it's here to show up, and it doesn't have a lift gate because I didn't know you had to have a lift gate, and I don't have a forklift, and I was like, I was going to have it delivered to my house. So I call another buddy, Rick Friedland, he was the founder and used to own a company called Silly Pint here in town. I was like, hey, can I use your loading dock? Like, my Fireside's just showing up. He's like, yeah, sure thing, man, come by. And so I have it all delivered. So I get all these pallets stacked up in front of Silly Pint, and I've got a picture there by him. I'm surrounded by awesome. My product. It was really, and it's in a box that has the Fireside logo on it. It felt really cool. And then, shuttle it back and forth with my mom and my stepdad, and we're running it in the truck, 15 at a time back to my garage and stacking it all up. So that was a rad experience. But when I got to the point of like scaling it is where we kind of ran into challenges, because it was such a unique device that I had somebody interested and they wanted to buy it it was a retail store, and they wanted to buy, however many. And they were like, hey, what sort of certifications do you have on this? And what kind of testing has been done? And there isn't, a lot of things you buy, there's a standard, there's a UL standard, or there's some kind of a, hey, if we're going to test it on these 3 things. And if it meets those, then you're good to go. You get the stamp. Just testing those can cost tens of thousands of dollars. There isn't even a test that exists for this thing. No one's doing a propane burning, fire dancing audio player. They haven't built it. And so you're looking at 100,000 plus to go have somebody create a test that they then say would make this product safe, then they've got to test you against it. So it was a roadblock that I couldn't
you just got whammied by a roadblock. Didn't even think it was going to happen. And that was it.
Yeah. So so I still have a handful of these that I'm keeping. So I continued to sell the ones that I had. And so I recouped my cost, but really, I didn't make money there. I learned a ton of lessons.
Yeah.
Those were the lessons that carried me into this next one. So I now remember what I forgot in the very beginning, now that we're rolling. So this idea came up, and coming from this thing that I thought was like a really cool design piece. And it's, I was selling them for $550. And then I've got this little koozie idea. Yeah. And so in my mind, I'm like, all right, well, that's not going to be this huge business, but here's what it can do for me. I can create a system so that anytime I have an idea, I've already got a process built that I can plug this idea into, and I know who to call for my photo video stuff, who to call for my design work, who's going to build my website, where do I go, who are my sales channels, and who do I talk to get in those things. And I'm like, if I build this system using this as the proxy, this is kind of like the straw man that I'm going to run through that to piece it all together. Now, when I have another idea that's like a viable idea, I plug it back in and I go run this thing. So I gave myself a goal. I had a journal at the time. It's called the Self Journal, I think. And it's like you pick 3 big, hairy goals, and they're 90-day goals. And I'm sure you're familiar with this type of model. And one of the goals was koozie idea, or something like that, sleeping bag koozie idea. That was one of the main goals. And the thing was, in 13 weeks, can I go from idea, which is what started the clock, to a Kickstarter campaign? I mean, we're 7 years later. I haven't done a Kickstarter campaign, but I've managed to build this business, and we've had, tons of success. And I suppose that, now I incidentally also built that system. So I can, my next idea, or, people that I'm working with that need assistance and guidance through that, like, I've got that system built, I've got the connections. And the really cool thing about this one is we sell on all kinds of channels. Like I mentioned before, we're outdoor. Yeah. We can sell these in grocery. We can sell these in Ace Hardware. We can sell them at events. Yep. We can sell them in lifestyle stores. We can sell them in mass. I sold them at like Pack Ship and More. And you know what I mean? Like we can sell them in gift shops. So I've got this huge network now of people, connections, buyers, sales people that call on buyers, and rep groups, and all these things that if I've got somebody that's got a grocery product, I can help them talk to somebody in grocery because I've been there. It's a different buyer, but I know the buyer and be like, hey, who buys this type of thing? Put me in touch with those people. So I saw this quote recently, and it's like, I find it to be, I'm hopeful it's 100% true. And it's like, your first 5 years in business aren't where you get wealthy. It's where you learn how, or something to that effect. And I'm like, okay, so I've got 6+ years under the belt with Puffin. And because of the rapid growth we went through, I have this system, and I like understand that landscape to a particular degree. There's always more to learn, of course, right? Like you're never at the end. And that's part of the fun of being on this, is like the steep part of the learning curve is always, you never are off the steep part of the learning curve. There's just more and more. It's just, I'm further up than maybe some of the people I'm helping, or further up than where I'll have to start again. And I just go run that play again,
Yeah, that's really, really well said. 2 things I want to unpack. 2 key things. One, the first one being, while you were having all these ideas and going after all these ideas, were you keeping your full-time job? So when you were going to China, were you still running your full-time job? Were the 2 in parallel?
So yeah, this is kind of a fun one. I was actually hired. This guy, Bill Ryman, who has the factory, it's called Weiguo Solutions over in China. He ends up hiring me to help him like rep a product over here in the US. He's got this idea, and he's like, hey, I know how to do this side of things. Can you go help us on the marketing side of this? And so I had a job with him, and it ended up not going the way that we wanted it to go. And he had some business partners. And at a certain point, it became like I wasn't being as valuable there as they needed. And this thing was starting to take off. And so I got to that crux of like, all right, this isn't making enough to pay me, but it's really close. This job isn't working out anymore. I've got 3 months worth of runway from my personal life, like to run myself through the end of that particular year, which I think was 2018. So I'm like, do I go out and get a job and figure out, and keep doing this on the side? Or do I just like full send, commit, and try and make enough progress in the next 90 days so that first of the year I can start taking a paycheck from this thing? I'm meager and minimal, but enough to like float me by. And as an entrepreneur, you know what I did, right?
Yeah,
like I
of
took
course
the
we
risk,
know
right?
we see what you did.
Exactly.
Yeah,
I
you
took
took
the swing.
risk.
So, that's an interesting thing that like entrepreneurs are generally a very different breed when it comes to risk tolerance. And that's something that I didn't realize to what degree that is. And now as I'm, I know a lot of other entrepreneurs, and I know people that are hired in because entrepreneurs started a business and they come in, and it's different, man. It's not just like, oh, I'm a little risky. I'm way over here on the like, I'll take financial risks, and to a fault sometimes, right? We can do stupid things. I'm not saying it's a good thing. I'm just saying that there's this spectrum, and entrepreneurs exist way down on one extreme. And it's every play all in. Like I'll take all of the risk. Yeah. So I took the swing, and it paid off. I was able to was just hit the numbers we needed. And I was able to pay myself like $5,000 a month to keep myself alive, and ran that up until I was able to like slowly spool that up into like a still small payment, because you've got to dump, especially a fast growth business, you're dumping everything you can back into the business, and still it's not enough. You got to go out and borrow money. So I've been through multiple like debt rounds and pulled in millions of dollars in debt. I'm talking about risk, right? I had multiple millions of dollars of debt that we were using to service the business so that we could go build it.
Yeah, make inventory. Exactly. Make it happen at a pace that was now going to work. I think it's cool to hear you, because there's a couple things the first couple ideas, it's cool because first you kept a full-time job and you tried to create the idea. Okay, it got shut down. You didn't shut your mind. Because you're an entrepreneur, you can't shut your mind. You just kept thinking. Then the next idea came. You built the prototype by hand, right? Kept your full-time job, built the prototype by hand, went and made it happen. So you're running. I mean, if you think about it, this is not an easy thing. You're keeping a full-time job, building your family, and at the same time, you're also trying to take this idea and bring it to life. So you ran all those parallel, and then you hit this crux, this moment in time, just like you said, where it was, hey, am I going to go all in? I have 3 months of runway. Most people live for security, right? You had 3 months of runway, an idea that although it was tested, it wasn't like 100% sure that it was going to work. And you just said, hey, I'm going to jump off this cliff, pull the trigger, and we will learn how to fly. And you just made it happen. And it's pretty amazing to see it, and smart to be able to sometimes you hear that story many times. Maybe someone's like, hey, I got this idea. I need to quit my job and jump all in. Well, that's actually not necessarily the truth. There's going to be a tipping point. You have to test many entrepreneur ideas, especially innovative ones like yours. You have to test them out. The first couple probably aren't going to work, but it's when you go with your gut, when you have that moment, boom, follow it. And that's exactly what you did. And that's what you're helping people do today, right? Same thing.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a lot of different, and there's a lot of skill sets. Like some of those ideas I had before might have been very viable products, but I didn't have the knowledge to get it where I needed to take it, right? I didn't have a mentor. I didn't have somebody that could take me under their wing. I didn't have the experience. I don't have an MBA. So, you're like learning on the fly.
Yeah. School of hard knocks. Exactly. 100%. Like you didn't know that roadblock was going to hit you about the certifications. Right. You didn't know. You had to go through it, through the pain of that, and just get hit with it right in the face. You had no idea it was even coming, right? Small ones like the forklift.
Sure.
And big ones like the certifications. Both of those, you went through it. The other big one I wanted to dive in, and then we'll dive into how you're helping people today, because I love that, is when you said the key was the idea. You had the koozie idea, but what I heard you say was you really started to focus on, okay, I've got these great ideas. I know I'm going to continue to have ideas, but let me try to figure out this system, this operating system, this framework. Essentially what I heard you say is, hey, I know I've got these ideas. I'm going to go from this entrepreneur idea to let me do this really hard work on the framework, especially for entrepreneurs. Some of the hardest thing for me to do has been to create the standard operating procedures, the frameworks for the business. And you then said, hey, I'm going to focus on this. And can I go from in the next 13 weeks from idea to Kickstarter? You didn't do a Kickstarter, but you created this framework. Talk to us about the framework that you created.
Yeah. And that kind of, I wouldn't say that it's like defined. I don't have like a document that's like, do this, do this, do this, because it's so different for every product. But by going through that process and thinking about those things and focusing on those things, you end up, what's around the next bend, what skills you need, who you might need. And then you let those people do, like my core competency isn't in accounting. I know enough about accounting to know how far I can take it. And then when I need to go get the guy, and I know who the guy is now. Exactly. Right. So that's kind of the system that I have. So, So yeah, that has been really helpful and will continue to be helpful for me as I have additional ideas, or I partner up with other people and do startups, or like I do coaching and consulting now. And that's incredibly helpful because, like I said before, a lot of these ideas I had might have been very viable, but I didn't know what roadblocks were coming. I couldn't see around the corner. If you've got a partner that has seen around those corners, they're going to be able to tell, and they might not see everything either, right? Like I tell my coaching clients, like, I'm not going to have every answer for you, and I'm not going to see every roadblock, but there are some that you won't see that I absolutely know are going to be there. Because I've been there. I absolutely know they're going to be there, and they can be really costly to the point of like your business can fail if you don't see that coming and don't know how to manage it when you get there. And so by being prepared ahead of time and like having a guide kind of take you along the way, it's still going to be a challenge, right? No one's climbing that mountain for you. You hire a Sherpa or a guide, you're climbing that mountain. You just got some help to do it. You've got a much better chance to get there.
100%. We talk a lot about the growth mindset here, and we actually just filmed one about like a blueprint, having blueprints. So the framework or the blueprint, and the importance of somebody who sets the blueprint up. Well, you could try to write the blueprint as you're going, or you could partner with, connect with somebody who's been there, done that, has a blueprint, has been through it, right, in multiple different ideas, and then can help you take the same blueprint but write your plan into it, right? And it makes such a difference having good coaches, people who've been there, people who can lead you through the process, still make it your personality. But to me, if I can invest, for me, I will any day of the week. I learned this, and then I strongly believe it, that there's an abundance of money. There's an abundance of money and opportunity in the world. But the one thing that we don't have an abundance of, the one thing that is actually finite for us, we're only allotted a certain amount of time. Right. So if I can take money, which I can always make more of, and trade that to gain time, I'm going to do it every day of the week. So if I was an entrepreneur who had an idea and I believed in that idea, I would 1,000 times over take money, which would be hard to give up initially, to get the coaching and consulting that I need, because it's going to save me so much time. And ultimately, let's say you have to make a $5,000, $10,000, $25,000 investment. It's going to save you 10 times that. It will, just purely in time. And so, if I could have told myself that 3 years ago, I wish I would have, because I would have saved a lot of time.
Oh man, absolutely. Yeah. Pay for speed. Yeah. Which is effectively time, right? And pay for access to people, to places, to the things that you need to make that business move forward for it. 100%. I think about that all the time. I think, man, I've learned, I'm lucky enough that the business has survived all of the mistakes that I've made, but I've learned. It's interesting because like on my website, I talk about all these cool things that I've done and all the accolades and all like these accomplishments, but those are the results of all the mistakes I made and had to correct. And I go, man, I could have done that in 3 years instead of 6 if I'd have known then what I know now, right? Yeah. And so I think, man, if I could have hired myself with my today self 6 years ago, hands down would have hired. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, all day long, all day long.
And I mean, you would just enjoy the ride so much more too, because there is no shortage of stress in entrepreneurship, no matter how you do it, right? It's just like I said, it's like type 2 fun. You're climbing a mountain, guide or no guide, you're sweating, you're struggling, but going it alone and having to figure out your own solutions every single time, it weighs on you. Like I look back sometimes and I think about my friends that took the more traditional route, that like went and got the job, that I'm not employable. I'm not that guy.
You're done. You decided.
Right. And I look at that and I'm like, even if we end up at the same place, say at 50 years old, and we've got the same bank accounts and, we've both got families, we've got these things, half of me wonders, did they enjoy that ride more than I did? Because I was so stressed. Because when you've got like my house is mortgaged and I've got $2 million worth of debt and I've got $267 in the bank and I've got $40,000 in payroll due 3 days from now, like that's a real story. That's a real thing. And some of that you get stronger for, and some of it you're gonna have a limp for the rest of your life because of that stress. And so I think that's one of the things I do for my clients is I try to do my best to ensure that they're enjoying that ride, because I wish I had enjoyed my ride a little bit longer. I stressed so much because I was the one having to find the solutions all the time. And so it's fun and it's exciting, but it's fun and exciting to learn those things with a little help, just like a tutor, as it is to find it and learn it on your own. That's just much harder.
Yeah, 100%. And I know the payroll one. That's how you end up with gray hairs really quickly
Right?
at 30 years old. So yeah, it's really cool that you've decided to look at all that whole journey and then say, hey, yeah, I'm so passionate about entrepreneurship. I'm so passionate about, just what it brings in life. The whole being an entrepreneur has a lot of ups and a lot of downs, a lot of excitement, but it also has a chance to change the world, like in a really cool way. A lot of happiness and fun times come from this, right? A lot of laughs and just a lot of enjoyment comes from making different things. And so, it's cool that you can, in entrepreneurship, you can have these innovative ideas and the journey of building those ideas into businesses and all the ups and the downs. I mean, it's for me, we're 3 years into doing it in a different way. It's been one of the best decisions I've ever made, even though sometimes I feel like I'm like, I literally feel like, what am I doing? Why am I doing this? Like, why am I doing this? So it's really cool that you've taken that, said, hey, how do I take all these lessons? And then you've decided to go and help new entrepreneurs that are also going on their journey. That leads me to my next question. So like, what's next for Puffin and what's next for you?
Yeah. Puffin's up and running. We've kind of done a recent changeover with a lot of the staff, and so we've always had a great crew. But as the business moves on, you have different skill sets that are needed at different phases of the business, which is a thing that I've learned in this. And so we've got a really incredible team right now, and we're looking for like that second stage rocket booster to hit again. And I have every belief that it will. We've been a little bit flat as COVID has kind of like come to an end, and there were some headwinds in some of the spaces that we operate in the retail spaces. And so now we're looking at that next opportunity to go make a big splash. And we think that we've got enough of a foundation and the right team to go get that done. And I've stepped out of the main leadership role there. I was able to step out. We brought in a hired gun CEO, and that's been amazing. We've had two. In fact, we had an interim CEO who's an incredible person and has a great background and some big successes in the product space. Yeah. He came in, helped us kind of tighten things up, helped us find who's going to replace me permanently as the CEO. And so we've got Torian now, incredible. He's got his eyes on the prize. And so I get to take some of that stress off of my shoulders and contribute as much as I can. I'm now a founder and head of partnerships. So I get to go out and do the fun things and go feel like, hey, who should we be working with? And go try and like get some partnership deals going, get licensing going. But at some point that will probably wind down, and the value of me being a founder and still being involved. Like we've hired specialists in all the roles, and so being a generalist is no longer all that valuable. And so I'll slowly start to kind of pull back my involvement on a day-to-day basis. But every belief that Puffin will continue to just go off and do its thing and become a household name, which is the hope. As far as me personally, like. I have this analogy, which you'll dig because you're in the building industry. I learned this about myself, I don't know, 8 or 9 years ago. I built a deck for the first time. I built my deck in my backyard. It's 400 square foot. And of course, I had to do it my own way. And so I was like, I could put those at an angle, and then realize what that meant when I had to get down to do it, right? Like, I now have to cut every one of those boards at an angle. Okay. So I learned how to build a deck. And I loved it. And it was super fun being out there working with my hands, like physically changing the world in my own special, small little way. And then later on, I had to go build another deck. And I was like, oh man, this is miserable. Like I didn't want to be building this deck because there was nothing, there was so much left for me to learn. Like I talk about, I like to be on that steep part of the learning curve. There was so much less for me to learn. And so it's an interesting place because I gather all this knowledge, and then I don't want to go do the thing again because there's not as much to learn there. But now I've got all this knowledge and it's just locked up in there. And so that's where the beautiful part for me about now engaging in coaching and consulting is I have all this knowledge so I can share it, but it's not purely altruistic, right? It's not just for their benefit. One, I get paid, right? Like my value is knowledge. My knowledge is valuable. And so I make a small income there. But also I get to learn from, that product's a little bit different. So I know these things, but I don't know about this piece. Let's figure that out and let's work together to figure out how that goes. And so I get to ride along in, I'm the navigator, but I'm on somebody else's journey, and I get to be on that steep part of the learning curve with them as well, because there are things that I don't know. There's industries that I don't know. I'm a $20-ish price point, and I've got custom clients that I'm working with that have $4,500 price point items. That's a very different, even the financial model. Like you're like, oh, sell a thing, you get your net or your gross profit, and then you've got your contribution margin, then you work your way through all your expenses and you've got a profit down here. That's not this, like, even though that model is the same, it's like the percentages and how you look at it. And does this make sense? Does it not make sense? Can we pay that much of a commission? Can you give that big of a discount? Those change dramatically based on the scale and like just the price alone.
Yep.
So all the other things, where you're manufacturing, and there's so much still out there to learn. And so I get to go kind of piggyback on other people's journeys and get to go along with them. And so that part's super exciting for me. So that's where I'm starting to like slowly lean into. And so as I build my coaching and consulting practice, looking for, people in this startup, I'm very specific to product-based startups because that is the knowledge that I can bring.
Yep.
And then beyond that, like we're going to run into challenges, or it's a different year, right? It's not, AI is here now. So there's different ways to solve problems that we didn't have when I was starting this. So getting to learn alongside these people that I'm also helping bring my knowledge it's incredibly exciting for me. And it's definitely, like I said, it's not all purely altruistic. I want to help people. I genuinely do.
Yeah.
But I gain a lot from the process as well. And I'll gain a lot. And then that gives me more to go give the next time around. Now it's like, oh wait, no, I learned this thing just last week from this other client. And oh man, and then the cross-pollination there. I've got clients now that this person's he decided to do his own manufacturing. And so he's brought in this like massive tool that he's got like $40,000 capital investment. And I got somebody else who's like, man, I'm looking for a place to do injection molding, but I can't find anybody stateside. And I'm like, boom, I got the guy, right? And so the connections, it really becomes a small world. Yeah. So that's really fun for me to be able to like be out there networking, meeting new people, sharing my knowledge and gathering more.
Yeah. I mean, it's a true win-win. That's what I would call being a true win-win. And I believe deeply in my heart that the world needs more real life education through and through. I think that real life education, not this theoretical, go to business school, theory-based stuff, but real, true, real life education. I think the world is hungry for it. I actually think that that's how you create a change in the world, by doing that in each small niche that you have. Sure. And so I think it's awesome that you're doing that as a venture, in a real, true win-win situation. On that, because I know we also have a timeline, you got an appointment you got to go to, but really quickly, let's say let's create a little like quick things. Let's say somebody's got an idea, kind of what you said, from idea to Kickstarter. Brainstorm me through like, hey, I got this idea, and in 13 weeks, from idea to 13 weeks Kickstarter, what does that look like? What do I need to do? What's the first thing after I have this idea? How do I create, that framework? Yeah,
sure. I mean, this again, for physical products, you've got to figure out, in order to do any of the like financial modeling and figuring out whether this is even viable or worth approaching, you've got to know what it's going to take to make the thing. Yep. And so you've got that whole engineering piece you've got to figure out first. And where
do you even start looking?
So when I have a patent on an idea that I still haven't gotten off the ground. And I was in that, I was like, I've got this idea. I don't have the technical chops to figure it out. How do I go about doing this? And so I started looking for like prototyping companies, and I was getting bids for like $250,000.
Yeah, crazy stuff.
And I was like, that's not going to work. And so I just start like YouTubing, man. Yeah. You just like, people underestimate their own ability to learn and to go practice those things. But with YouTube, man, you can learn. I mean, you're the YouTube guy. Like, you can learn anything on YouTube, and you just learn it one step at a time. And
that's so cool. See, that's a cool answer. See, you just figured out YouTube.
Figure it out, because there is no answer. If you've got the money and you want to, and you can pay for that speeding up your timeline that much, and you want to go pay $200,000 to have somebody prototype a water bottle for you, sure, that'd be my guess. But for most of us, that's not an option.
Yes, so you're going to learn how to make it step by step, just like you did with the fireside. I mean, in your garage, just like you did with that piece. Okay, so step one would be really figuring out, I mean, you got to get the prototype, because the only way to figure out the pricing is to get that prototype. Yeah. Just like you said, when you built it, you're like, hey, they're still trying to figure out what it's going to cost them to manufacture in China, but I know, because I built it by hand, I know what I could build if I stayed. So that's step one.
I think so. Yeah, you've got to know your price, because then you've got to know, like, hey, is somebody going to pay $20 for this versus $40 for this, or this is going to cost, like, it's a cool idea, but you just can't do it.
And it's sort of a 1-2 whammy. It's like you end up, by building the prototype or getting the idea, you get a prototype and you get an idea of what it costs you to make it probably costs you a ton of time, but what your inputs at least were, right?
Yeah.
So that's sort of your 1-2 whammy. And then from there, what do I do after that?
Yeah, I think one thing that's important to know here too is network and like just the connections that you have in the world. Like be a part of other entrepreneurial groups. There are tons of them on Facebook. There, like be a part of that world because you'll learn things, even just hearing other people chat with one another. And you will find somebody that's like, hey, I was an electrical engineer. I'd be happy to help you with that. Come, buy me a beer and we'll mess around. That's easier than you think. You don't have to go pay somebody $250. And they may take like one step for you of the 5 steps you need to take. So build a network, get involved with other entrepreneurs. Super, super helpful. And they're all like, we're cut from the same cloth. So you'll get along with them really well. And then from there, I think we run this model that we call like, where to play, how to win. And so it's kind of a strategic overview of, all right, I've got this thing. I have a general sense of who my target market is. How do I get to them? Yep. How are you going to get that out there? And so without going all the way down to the tactics, you've got to figure out like, all right, what are the channels I'm going to go play in? Am I going to sell these just direct to consumer? Am I going to go into stores? Okay, if you're going to go into retail, what retail do you sell? Is it a grocery store thing? Is it a hardware thing? Is it at a department store? Like, what is the channel you're going to go play in? Now you know your numbers, so you can decide, all right, well, can I do a 4X on this? And will the end consumer pay $200 for this thing that cost me $50 because I've got to sell to the wholesale. I've got to sell to, at wholesale for 100. They're going to need to make their margin on it. You start to get those things figured out. So you got to figure out like, what's the landscape? Where am I going to go with this thing? And that's your go-to-market plan.
Yep.
And then you've got all your different pillars within the business. You've got your finance. How am I going to pay for this thing? Do the numbers make sense? You've got your product side of things. Who's developing this? How are we manufacturing it? What does that look like? What does that process look like? Then you've got operations, which is like your fulfillment. Like, okay, once we've got the product done at the factory, how are we getting it here? Where are we putting it? Who's managing how it's getting shipped out? And then you've got marketing is like the huge base. Yeah. And then you've got sales. So you've got these few, these kind of pillars of the business that are all really important. And so you start chipping away at each one of them, but you have to know, you can't just go tackle one from top to bottom and then move on to the next one. You've got to, it's whack-a-mole. You're like, if I get a little bit off of this one, then a little bit of this, and you just start to, you're just wearing all the hats all the time. And it's honestly, it's part of the fun, man. Like you get bored of this thing. It's like, okay, man, I can't look at a spreadsheet anymore. Let me go design this next thing. Or let me go, design a post for Instagram that I think is going to like make sure that people see this product that I've got. And so it's just, man, it's a lot. Like I look back and go, how did we do this? Yep. Right. And so having help along the way has certainly helped. I had a co-founder.
Just step by step, baby. Just step
that's it. And so
step.
You just got to be pushing all these little things down. And then eventually you get the model put together.
Yeah.
But
I love it. I think the key, what I really like there is like, you have the idea, and if you go and take the step forward of like, if you actually put the energy to create the prototype and make that happen, that's a key component, right? Like if you have the idea and then you try to go make the prototype and you give up on making the prototype, well, you get an answer there anyways. Yeah. One thing I would say, one thing I know myself is like many times people, they do what I call like mental masturbation on an idea. So they say an idea and then they just go over and over and over and over. Man, a year later, nothing else has happened. So one thing I would add, just like what you said, give yourself a deadline. Like we work, especially entrepreneurs, they work well on deadlines.
Sure.
And so I would say a key component would be give yourself a deadline to execute. In 13 weeks, can you make it happen? And then boom, work backwards from there. So
and if you miss, you still got farther, and then you set a new one. You go, hey, I tried. Like you're not going to hit all of your goals, but at least you drove, and like find some accountability in there, whether it's your wife that's holding you accountable, or a business partner, or just some penalty
deadline. Exactly.
Yeah.
Penalty.
Like if you don't hit that, like, and so you're motivated to do that, and it doesn't just sit there. In your mind, like you've got to go you've got to take risks.
Yeah.
And that's the challenge for a lot of people that stops them before they just go do it. But you'll learn so much from those. You'll learn more from the failures than you do from the wins anyway. So it's a win-win no matter which way you go.
It's a win.
You just got to go get it out in the world.
Yep. Exactly. I couldn't agree more. Tyrone, I've had an absolute blast having this conversation. I definitely want to have you back on. I want to just touch base on how it's all going. But if people want to get connected with you, how do people get connected with you, Tyrone?
I've got a website for my coaching and consulting. It's tyronehazen.com. So I'm sure you can post on it.
Yeah, we'll link it. We'll link it everywhere, baby.
Yeah, you can look me up. I've got these businesses out there and stuff. So Google me.
Yeah. We'll have them Google you. Again, thanks for coming on. Thanks for dropping the knowledge and spending time with us. And I cannot wait to see where you go and have you back on to talk about it.
Man, I sure appreciate it. Thank you for doing this. Thanks for having me as a guest. It's been fun.
Sweet. And with that, we will see you on the next one, baby.